Today on the breakdown, we break down something a little different, your mind and your thoughts and your beliefs and your body. Everything gets broken down. But fear not, audience, we will put it all back together and you will be 70 to 80% of what you are right now, give or take. A reasonable facsimile at least, and perhaps a better version of it. Who knows once you eliminate the fat, right? Get rid of that 20%. No one needed that 20% anyway. But not only that, we're also going to talk about the scandal at the World Series of Poker main event. Jonathan Tamayo, World Series of Poker main event champion, using solvers, using coaching on the side, in between hands, after almost every hand. Is this okay? What really happened? We know everything. And we're going to talk about it right now in the breakdown with Grant Dennison and Jonathan Levy.
Yeah, no hand this time, which is
No
exciting. It means even less preparation for us than normal, which is
I don't know.
exactly what I'm looking for at all times.
We had to look up how to pronounce Dominic Nietzsche's name. That
Nietzsche,
took a second.
Right? Nietzsche,
yeah.
Nietzsche, not Nietzsche like the philosopher, but Nietzsche. Slightly
Nietzsche.
different.
Yeah.
Okay. One of us will probably fuck that up at some point.
Oh, yeah.
But that's
it's fine,
okay.
though. It's okay.
It's okay
We got it
because
right at the
he's
beginning. It's enough.
Especially because he's currently a pariah, so it's okay if we fuck up his name, right? That's how it works.
I mean, give or take.
So
Give or take.
I guess we should recap the situation for somebody out there who doesn't know exactly what's going on, but they probably do. But just in case you don't, just a quick recap. Jonathan Tamayo won the main event. He had one of the great players in the game, Dominic Nietzsche, and Joe McKeon on his rail, who, McKeon won the main event in 2015. And they were clearly coaching him, which, coaching has been allowed at the World Series forever. But they also had a laptop and were definitely doing solves. It's not entirely clear what they were solving, if it was for previous hands or future iterations,
Probably
and blind
both.
levels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But this drew the ire of the poker community. Lots of opinions on its legality, on if it should be allowed at the World Series, if it actually was allowed, or if they sort of skirted the line there, and what it means for poker, and if it's a good look for poker, which I think everybody's kind of on the same page on that, but we'll get into all of that. There's a lot of piling on about it. People don't like it, and it's our job to be objective and try not to reflect the piling on and just pile on as well. But it's possible that we're just going to pile on as well. So let's
find out.
Let's figure it out,
Okay.
So anything else to add to that, to just to the recap of exactly what's going on here?
I don't think so. I mean, they were doing this to some degree, I think, the entire final table, but I think it really kicked up on day 2 when there were 3 players left, where they were, at least it was more obvious that they were using the laptop and stuff like that. I don't really remember if they were using it beforehand or if they were just sort of talking to him in between hands, but they were talking to him constantly.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, there's a lot to talk about here, I think, for us as the poker guys, ambassadors of all poker things.
And for me, it's reflective of a greater problem in poker, and I think that's obvious for everybody, but I remember when solvers first started becoming used by some of the higher level players in something like 2014, some time around there, maybe 2015.
Yeah.
And it was exciting because it's you get to have this new type of knowledge about this game that we play, and that's interesting. We actually have a way to get answers, and maybe the answers aren't exactly, correct by whatever standard you want the answer to be correct, but it's some sort of thing giving you an objective result based on your subjective place, which is cool. But I remember at the time saying to you, Jonathan, this is going to be very bad for poker. I don't think this is going to be a quality infusion into the game. I think it will reduce the quality of poker. And you were kind of on the other side at the time. I don't know where you are now.
I mean, it hasn't reduced the quality of poker, right? The quality of poker has improved.
It depends on what you mean by quality. When I say quality, I mean the quality of it as a game, not the quality of the play of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Then sure.
So I mean, I've always been on that side of things, despite having used solvers, and not to the extent that most people who play as much poker as I do, but and understanding the outputs and stuff. But I do feel like it's bad for the game in general that it exists. just as a baseline. So that's where I'm coming from to start in this conversation.
Okay. I was always against the idea of coaching sites back in the day. I had a friend, friend of the podcast, in fact, Matt Matros, who was part of Card Runners way back when. And I was always like saying to him, I don't think you should be doing this, man. Why are you giving all this information effectively away? Like, you're not making that much money doing this. Like, why are you doing this? And his point was, the cat's already out of the bag, dude. Like, Card Runners already exist, so I might as well get paid to do it, which is fair enough. But
yeah,
I always thought that was kind of sucked a little bit, even though I certainly benefited from some of that stuff too. But I think overall, like, not finding your way and instead having these coaching things, I think is always like a little kind of lame. And it's one thing to have individualized coaching. I think that's different in mentoring than I'm going to make a video, show everything that I do and explain it all and put it out to the world. And now everyone's going to start to play like this, which is basically what happened, right? For these sites. And it changed the way people played really quickly. And I mean, people got better, but they all got better at the same time, more or less. And I don't know. I always thought that was sort of not great. I think poker was better if you really had to figure it out. But that's not realistic anymore. We're way past that. So be it.
Yeah, and I agree that is slightly similar, but I think it's different than what the solver has done, right? Because the game used to be, even with coaching, like maybe you're trying to mimic what somebody who is good, who taught you what to do, is doing, and you might not know the exact reasons for that. But solvers take that to the extreme, where it's like, I may have no idea why the solver wants me to open a 2.2 instead of 2.4, but I'm damn well going to do it. And like, it's like, how can I? It's a different type of good player now, right? It's not the Doyle Brunson, Stu Unger, like, I can figure it out better than you when we're sitting at the same table. Like, I'm going to figure it out right now better than you. It's, I've studied a lot and I remember every iteration, which is a different thing.
It's both, but you're right. There's certainly a lot of that, of the latter, and it's not as great. The reason why I brought up coaching, though, and the sites and all that is because the way the Jonathan Tamayo thing played out is both of those things have to be present. Not the sites, but the idea of like coaching someone like this and using the solver for this to have ultimately been an issue, right? Like if the solver exists, but he doesn't have people right there on the rail who are better than he is. Like, that's not a put down on him. These are like two of the better players that exist, Joe McKeon and Dominic Nietzsche. But like that, the whole thing it's like a big foundation that's been built based on these things. And this is sort of like maybe the natural conclusion of where we're always going to end up is in these tournament places where people are finding ways to get access to this information even when they're not really supposed to.
Yeah, I agree. So the coaching element is one element. The solver element is more the element of like what Tamayo is trying to do as a player is mimic what a solver would do rather than, navigate the waters of poker the way Doyle Brunson had to. It's not as cool. It's emblematic of the loss of the spirit of the game and the excitement and entertainment of the game. Like the best players in 2004 were so much more interesting than the best players now because they were doing shit differently than each other for one, and also they had personality because
the best players in the game used to be degenerate gambler types who were pretty good at reading people, and now the best players in the game are math nerds. Like as a math nerd, I feel I can say that without pejorative. Without anything pejorative with that.
If you watch Dominic Nietzsche talk, you're like, he's a math nerd.
No, they like to be able to think about, like Jason Kuhn, when he's trying to decide what to do, he's like randomizing, using his chip stack and stuff like that to try and figure out, is this, part of the 22% of the time I raise 3.1x here, on the turn or not, that's all mathy, formulaic, algorithmic type stuff. And that's not a put down on Jason Kuhn. Of course, he's one of the best players in the world, and we all strive to be like him in all ways, pretty much. But it is how things have changed. But can we get to maybe more of the heart of all this? So all that stuff we know already, right? The thing that's different here is this year, and actually last year as well, the World Series of Poker had some rules in place around this stuff, right? So last year was actually written into the World Series of Poker rules that you couldn't use a solver at the table or in between hands to help you. Right?
Yeah.
This year it was not in the written rules, but they made an announcement during every tournament that you couldn't do that. Yeah. So what I don't understand is how is it that Tamayo was allowed to very openly, I don't think he was being surreptitious at all. I think he was being very obvious about it, right? So I can't really fault him so much for any of this. People are like going after him. He wasn't like pretending not to do it. It'd be one thing if he was pretending, right? It'd be another thing entirely. But this is more like he's just going, this is his way of getting coaching, and he's not thinking anything of it. And the fact that the tournament director didn't step in, is that Jack McClellan? I'm not sure anymore.
Jack Effel.
Jack Effel. Okay, that's right. I don't understand why he didn't step in at any point. Like, he shouldn't need another player to speak up. That should have been very easy for him to go over to those guys and say, "Hey, you have to shut this down right now," or even just like, "That's a penalty. You use the solver in between hands. You know you're not. We announced that you're not allowed to do it. That's a one order penalty. You do it again, you're going to miss a level, and that would be the end of it, right? It'd be over." Like, where was the oversight here? To me, that's the biggest fault in all of this, even though the other stuff looks worse. I don't understand how the World Series of Poker let this happen.
I agree. If we're going to assign fault, it would be to the World Series of Poker, not to Tamayo and Nietzsche and McKeon. Although, subsequently, Nietzsche has not been like crushing it with his responses to people. But
that's different, though.
It is. He's kind of been doubling down in ways that are not cool. Called Daniel Negreanu a moron, stuff like that.
He's a troll, though. In fairness to him,
yeah.
So he may be seeing this whole thing as just sort of an absurd deal. I don't know, but either way, yes, he's been doubling down for sure. Now there is one other thing that happened with Tamayo, which is when he won, he went over, was hugging people, and he took an earpiece out of his ear, gave it to McKeon, who then weirdly sort of surreptitiously gave it to another dude who then looked very uncomfortable and suspicious and sort of put it in his pocket, looked around, saw the camera was on him, and didn't look comfortable at all. That could be nothing. That's probably nothing. And
I
yet,
would hope that's nothing.
Super weird, right?
Yeah.
Now, they were right there on the rail, so I don't understand how in any way they would be able to talk to him and everyone wouldn't notice it, right?
Right.
And they don't know what he has, and he does. So there wouldn't be a whole lot of information they could even impart, I would think. But it was a weird extra moment with all of this already going on, which didn't help. But it's probably fine, right?
It's probably not worth us speculating on because we don't know anything about that. And I would guess that since nothing has come of it as of yet, if it had been a major thing that was figured out in any way, I think we would know more about that. So it was probably nothing.
I mean, I imagine it was music and they just didn't want to lose his iPod.
Yeah.
What are those things called? AirPods. Right. He didn't want to lose it, is my guess. Although he could have put it in his own pocket, but who cares? Let's go back to the two main pieces. One is, what do we think in general about the idea of, in any tournament setting, where someone can go and get information in between hands consistently, useful, powerful information? What do we think about that? And then two, what should be done about this, and what should the World Series Poker have done or do about this? Let's start with the first one, though, because this isn't the only time coaching has happened on the rail.
No, and it always seemed innocent or kind of fun and cool in a way, like in the past. But I do think it is now time for it to be litigated out of the game. If it can be done in a reasonable way that doesn't really hinder the game and make it impossible to police, because it doesn't feel like the game that we signed up for necessarily, or the game that people mostly want to play. And this is especially impactful on recreational players, which is, of course, where all of the money comes from. We have to think about the poker economy at large. And this is clearly a very bad look for poker. This is something that people have been saying. They use the term bad look for this a lot because it's a very apropos term. Not just the laptop and everything, but the idea that if you're a pro, and I think the dichotomy of Tamayo and Griff is why this is so powerful, because Griff is just like this guy who's not a pro, whose rail is like his cute Midwestern parents who are just like, yeah, I love Griff, and Tamayo's rail is like a World Series champion and a GTO master who owns a solver site helping him solve how to beat this guy who has 47K in Hendon.
Exactly.
Right? And so the recreational players aren't going to want to play anymore if that's how it's always going to be.
I got to tell you, fuck the recreational players. I don't want to play anymore. I mean, I'm in a big spot. against someone like Tamayo at a World Series final table, and my rail is, no offense, you and some of our poker friends, and his rail is those fucking guys, there's already an inequality in terms of our skill level, I'm sure. It just gets widened, right? Like,
right.
It makes me playing less valuable for me, too, if that kind of shit's allowed. Let alone someone like Griff, who, I mean, it's wild because, yeah, like you said, Griff is 47,000 in Hendon, right? He's a true amateur. He made it to second place. And by the way, on ballsy, cool, interesting play, pushing people, sort of realizing he had to up the variance. He really dove into that, and that worked for him, and it was awesome to watch. Really awesome to watch. Tamayo should have had to deal with that on his own. And the fact that he had like a team with him, I think really feels unfair to Griff, especially when there's a $4 million difference between second and first. Any amount of money difference, it's still unfair, but it's most pronounced where it feels like Tamayo got help that he probably shouldn't have gotten to help, which made it easier for him to win that extra $4 million and deny that to Griff. And by the way, if Griff wins, it's an unbelievable story for poker. When Tamayo wins, nobody really cares, really, right? In the same way,
it's only
because it's an
only
amateur
kind of
versus
bad
pro.
for poker because of how it went down.
Well,
if it
too.
were just Tamayo, if it were Tamayo without all of the other stuff, it would have just been like, oh, okay,
Yeah, it would have been fine.
A pro one, yeah,
it would have been like, who cares? Moving on,
Yeah.
right? Which is what's always happened in this case. Maybe the fact that he's Asian would have helped a little bit, but it didn't really help Kui win. When Kui win did, it didn't really seem to change anything much, as far as I could tell. Maybe it would have with Tamayo, but that's it, right? As opposed to guy who's never really, it's sort of like a moneymaker type thing. Not that there would have been a similar moneymaker boom, but it probably would have invigorated the amateurs more, right? That's not Tamayo's fault. I don't really blame Tamayo for any of this, to be clear. Like, he's doing what he's doing to win. They're letting him get away with this. He's being open about it. He's supposed to try and win that as much money as he can in this tournament any way he can. That's legal. And
I agree. I definitely don't blame Tamayo. But so I think to answer your first question, I think the end result, once again, should be that it's litigated out of the game. Because
and when you say it, let's be clear about what you think should be litigated, because I have my own opinions too. What do you think should be litigated out?
Any sort of coaching from the rail at all.
Exactly. I think it should be you're literally not allowed to talk to anyone until the level's over. Like, you got at the end of the level, you got your 15 minutes or your dinner break. You can talk about anything you want. That's fine. Everyone can go off to their respective corners, talk about anything they want. That's fine. As soon as the level starts in the main event, you got 2 hours. You cannot talk. They can yell stuff, but everyone can hear it, and that's it. And by the way, if they're yelling deep strategic stuff in code, you're penalized and they're out. It seems
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think it probably only applies to final tables and, I mean, maybe deep in the main event in general. But like for other World Series events, probably just final tables, because it's impossible to police if you're just like in the like giant ballroom of Paris, like not letting people talk to somebody on the rail, right?
I mean, mostly there's no rail to talk to. They're too far away. You have to run back and forth unless the rail's right on your back. Often you're in the morass and you'd never be able to get to the rail. But on all of the TV tables, you're in the you're in that room, or not the room, but you're in that area, and it's like absolutely people could be doing it. I think you're right. It would only be in obvious situations. So you're right. Someone might be able to. On day one of the World Series, their friends could be standing on the rail and they could be talking about stuff, and I guess that'd be difficult to litigate. But the dealer could be right there.
Who cares?
Right.
But
it probably doesn't matter.
Really, right?
But like, you do your best. But the point is, in the highest leverage point moments, at least, we would not allow this stuff, right? Like, it's one thing to get a little bit of advantage on day one or day two of the World Series main. It matters, but it doesn't matter much. It's another thing entirely when your head's up for $4 million extra. That little advantage really could be the difference between winning it and not, like right away. That's crazy. Yeah. I agree with you completely. They have to completely get rid of this. It's amazing they haven't. It's amazing this has been allowed already. And again, I don't understand, where was the oversight at the World Series? One, the players probably should have been talking about it. But two, where is Jack Effel? I just don't get how he didn't come down and stop it and like protect Griff. He did not protect Jordan Griff somehow. The amateur.
So we are 100% sure that this is not allowed to use the solver at this point.
I mean, Negreanu posted a tweet where he had video of what they announced multiple times of the day, at the beginning of certain levels or something like that in World Series events. And it was always, you cannot use a solver. If you are seen using a solver or any other GTO software during or in between hands, you will be penalized. So that seems like enough, right?
Yep. Another thing that a lot of people have pointed out is that poker is meant to be played as an individual game unless it's specifically a tag team event. Right. So there's something lost when it's not that cool. Like for those 2 hours, you're just completely on an island. You're on your fucking own.
Yes.
Like deal with it as best you can. You are the one who's putting your money at risk, ostensibly. So let's have you figure it out as it goes. And you can get counseling in the 20-minute break in between. You can talk about things that have happened, try to develop strategies, whatever. That doesn't bother me at all.
No.
But on a hand-by-hand basis, I think it's much better if you're just on an island, figure it out yourself. If you go off the rails, that's too fucking bad. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
It's an individual game.
To me, it's the equivalent if there was like a chess master who was playing 20 people at once, and every time they made a move and went to the next table, they stopped and conferred with other grandmasters about the last move they made. So it doesn't directly impact the next move, but of course the strategy matters, and of course it helps them with all their moves going forward every time, right? So because it's the same thing here where I'm sure Tamayo and company would argue some version of, well, I mean, I am on my own during the whole hand. But the moment the hand is over, to be able to go and ask, and there's literally audio of him saying, is that an open or not? Or like, how much am I supposed to open with this hand and stuff like that? What's the amount? And like getting very specific solver-based advice from two of the better players in the world who are also helping in other ways. It seems problematic.
You should have to right the ship between hands yourself instead of having your ship righted by some shipwrights who are there on the side to help you.
This is like what boxing is, right? Boxing is you're out there for the whole round, and if you're getting beat up, all they can do is throw in the towel and give up. That's the only move they have. They can't put in another big guy, and they can't say you're swinging it wrong. Stop for a second. Come here. You're swinging wrong. Hit him this way. You can only do it in the middle, and that's it, right? So when you're in jeopardy, you're just in jeopardy, and there's no one there to save you. That's what poker is supposed to be, for sure. Like you're saying, I'm not supposed to be playing McKeon and Nietzsche and Tamayo, just Tamayo. Like that's enough. That's already hard enough. Tamayo's already a massive favorite, heads up. And again, I don't blame him for trying to maximize that. But holy God, it's incredible that this was allowed to happen to me. Incredible.
And if this is like a sign of where poker is going, tournament poker at least, then it's so uninteresting. It's so incredibly uninteresting. So yes, I think they will do something about it. I believe they will.
I think so
it'll
too.
be much more explicit next year.
I mean, it was explicit. It was just about not really doing anything about it. But you're right. It could be more explicit. It could be more explicit.
It'll be more of a focus for sure. It will be the focus rule-wise, I think.
No question about it. It'll be huge. But I'm guessing they're still going to allow like talking to people in between hands and stuff like that. And it'll just be, you can't use, devices to help you. But how are you going to do that? Everyone has a phone. Like there's no real way to stop that. You could stop, I guess, the highest level of solver stuff because you need a laptop for that. But someone else could be running it far away and, talking to someone on the phone about it. In the end, I think it should be like what we're saying. You should not be able to have contact with people for your until there's the next break. You just can't talk to people, man. You go to the bathroom,
I like that best. Oh, another effective thing they could do, at least for the main event final table, is anybody on the rail seen talking strategy with a player is removed from the rail. So you slowly remove everybody who could possibly talk strategy with the player if they're willing to do it.
Yeah, but then what you end up doing is you incentivize people learning how to speak in code.
I mean, what if
what
kind of code could really get past everybody?
I mean,
I guess we'd have to think about it.
You really don't think these incredibly smart people aren't going to be able to come up with things that sound like they're talking normally, but they're actually saying stuff to each other? Of course they will. But why not just do the thing that they do, like on some game shows? They put you in a room, and there isn't a rail. How about no rail? We don't need a rail.
The rail really adds a lot to the ambiance for the audience. If we're trying to make this recreational friendly, I think the rail actually does help quite a bit for when the recreational players are watching the main event final table. It's the only poker they watch all year or whatever. They get to see that there's people cheering and stuff and the excitement of it. I think it does add to the excitement of poker, and I think something would be lost if it were fully removed.
But you could do things like have a rail, but have the players in a room where they can't see the rail, and you could even pipe in the sounds of the rail, so you still get all that, but they're not actually available to the players. You do something like that. So
maybe
the rail would know they're being heard. It would be basically the same thing from the rail's point of view. I guess they're not being seen, but they're on camera, so they're going to be all crazy anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that could work too.
Yeah, I guess we're on the same page. And so is basically the rest of the poker community. I don't know how the rest of the poker community feels about not allowing speaking to the rail.
I don't know
That's
either.
something that we kind of came up with just now. But
Seems obvious, though.
It does seem obvious. But I know that the vast majority of the poker community is not happy with how this went down and feels like it's really a negative look for poker and a bad sign of things to come if nothing is done about it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So here's a different situation. I think I know what you're going to say, but I just want to check in. So I know of very, very, like a high-end, one of the best players in the world type player who was in a really big spot recently at final table or near final table. I'm trying to be a little bit vague about it so that way no one can figure out who it is.
Yeah.
And the player was being helped by another like top tier player, being helped where that the player on the side in the stands was doing live tell stuff for them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I don't think we should allow that either.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I think
neither.
I think live tells is like the classic, like if you can figure it out and nobody else can, that's a superpower in poker. You shouldn't be able to pipe that in from somebody else's perspective.
Right.
You should be able to figure that out yourself or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
You know, like movie poker is what the recreational players want is movie poker, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like essentially a cowboy figuring it out better than the other person.
Right.
And that's what's romantic about poker.
I mean, one of the most basic rules in poker is it's one player to a hand.
Yeah.
Right. And it feels like we've somehow skirted that a bit now. And
well, the one player is still making the individual decisions in the hand, but they've been pre-coached on what they're supposed to do in each little spot in different iterations of the hand.
Yeah. But as soon as you finish that hand, you can go and talk about it and talk about the next hand. And if you're doing that every hand, which I don't know that Tamayo was doing it every hand, but there is a lot of video and images of Tamayo like going over to his rail right after a hand or, like and talking to them for a little bit, almost every time and looking at the computer. By the way, looking at the solver himself even, like him like leaning over and looking and seeing what it has to say, which now feels like we're even another level past like what's allowed and what isn't. Again, that's on the World Series to not have done it. Should the World Series, final question, should the World Series do anything about this now? One could argue that Jordan Griff was hurt by this. I think he clearly was hurt by this, right? How much it's impossible to quantify, but he was at least somewhat hurt by this. Should they do anything about it from his point of view? And by the way, other players at the final table, not just him, other players were potentially hurt by this too.
I don't think so. I think the toothpaste is out of the tube on that one. I think the enforcement would have had to have been swift and on the spot for it to be anything reasonable that everybody could agree on, because it was like a policing of the rules rather than some sort of posthumous decision to remove money from somebody's bank account and put it in somebody else's. I don't think that should be done. But I think we should definitely reevaluate, and I think we kind of came to the Occam's razor conclusion of no speaking to the rail at all during the tournament. If you want to try to remember every hand that you can that you think is important and talk on break, that's fine.
Yeah.
Who cares? But yeah, I think that would fix everything if it was just no talking to the rail during the hand or during like the active poker.
Should Jordan Griff consider taking legal action?
No.
Why not?
I think he will lose one. I think
he could be. He doesn't have to sue Tamayo. He could sue the World Series for not protecting him.
I don't think so. I don't think he was wrong to such an extent that it's worth taking legal action. I think it's just like, it's shitty. It's a bad look. It's not what you want, but it's not something that I think is worth a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you should take legal action?
I mean, I think you should be talking to lawyers. I don't know if you should take legal action. I mean, if I think suing the World Series of Poker is not the worst idea. If I was Jordan Griff, I would probably strongly consider that. They didn't protect him. They had very clear rules about it. he didn't win $4 million more dollars. It's very hard to quantify what that means, but I would think the World Series of Poker would be pretty interested in making that go away at least, and maybe he can get $1 million out of it or something like that. I'd be pretty interested in doing that if I was Jordan Griff, personally. Yeah.
And do you think he would be right to do so?
I think it's fine for him to sue them. Suing them is just saying, I have a beef, basically. So let a third party decide if I'm right or not, So it's not like he only wins a lot of the time. Like he only gets paid if either he wins because he convinced someone else or because the World Series of Poker thinks there's a good enough chance that he's going to win that they want to make him go away, right? So if they think he has no chance to win, they would never pay him, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's fine for him to do it. I think he should pursue it, actually, at least look into it, because something happened here and he wasn't protected, and he's the amateur. So, like, he's not the guy who would even think to necessarily speak up about it. Doug Polk asked him about this because Jordan Griff did an interview with Polk, and he said it didn't even, I was never really paying attention to what Tamayo was doing on his rail, and if I knew, I wouldn't necessarily have known to say anything anyway, he's got 47,000 in Hendon. He's just a dude. He's like he does aluminum siding or something. I don't know what he does. He sells radiators. It's not like if Jason Kuhn saw that shit, for sure he would have said something, right? For sure, or he'd be doing it himself.
Probably.
It'd be one or the other.
Yeah.
He would even the playing field. The fact that it was an uneven playing field and $4 million is at stake, I think you can make a really good case that the World Series of Poker materially hurt Jordan Griff. And would Griff have won? Probably not. But it's not a 0% chance that Griff would have won, right? It's probably 10% or 15% or something like that. 5%. I don't know what the number is.
You mean 5% better than it was? Because he still obviously didn't have a 0% chance to win with the solving.
5%. No, I'm saying that he would. I'm saying it's 5% that he would have actually won if Tamayo wasn't doing any of that and getting any. If that was stopped. It's 5% since he lost. I'm saying 1 in 20 times he wins, and maybe it's 1 in 10 times, maybe it's 1 in 3 times. I don't really know, but I'm thinking it's small, not big, because he's the amateur. Tamayo is really good and knows what he's doing, of course, and all these things. But even if it's 5%, that's $200,000 worth of equity we're talking about. Which if you have 47,000 in Hendon. It's pretty good, that's pretty good. And that's even if you don't have 40, whatever you have in Hendon, 200K is pretty good. And I'm just making up that number. I don't know. I think I would say he was wronged out of some money, out of some equity.
If I were Griff, I wouldn't sue. That's just my personal thing. I would be, I guess, a little annoyed, but I don't think it would be worth suing, in my opinion.
But what if your lawyer said, I think we can win the case? Would you still not sue?
I would probably not.
Really? Why?
Yeah. It was already a really great result for me. And, it was, while explicitly stated in verbal terms, it was not in the written rules. I think it's still a tiny bit of a gray area there as to what Tamayo was doing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything anybody was really expecting to be a problem leading into it. And it might, and Tamayo was clearly not doing something that he thought was surreptitious.
Oh, for sure. When you say no one was expecting it to be a problem, the World Series was making announcements about this throughout the day, every day.
That's true.
Throughout the entire World Series, because it was a problem in previous years, and they wanted everyone to be informed about it. So I think the World Series, in theory, was kind of on top of it, in theory, but not in practice.
For me, if I were Griff, I think I'm just not that guy. I'm not going to try to get maximum value out of every single spot. Except this is... This is the biggest spot of his life, to be clear. It's not every single spot. It's a $4 million spot. He'll probably never have another shot at winning an extra $4 million, literally ever in his life, most likely, right? It's not every single spot. This is the biggest spot. Yeah. I'm not so if you think it's 200,000 in equity.
I just made that up.
He won $6 million. I don't know. It's just not something I would consider doing. It's just not. That's just me. I'm just not that guy.
Yeah, I think that's. I think I 100% would sue if I were him, or at least look into it, because I feel like you're sort of going along some sort of weird rules of decorum or something like that, and I no interest in that. If the World Series didn't protect me, if I'm Jordan Griff, and we should at least investigate if I am owed something for that.
I'm just not a very litigious person, man. Just not going to do it.
I mean, if you're not going to do it in the biggest spot of your life, when are you going to do it? This is the biggest spot of his life. This is the time.
It depends on, I mean, like I would sue somebody if they tried to murder me. That counts as a big spot, right?
I mean, I don't think you can sue someone for murdering you.
Okay, whatever. For emotional damage.
Yeah, 100%. I think he should be. I'm sure he is talking to lawyers, and they should not be going after Tamayo. They should be going after the World Series, which is much bigger. And it is, honestly, it's the World Series' fault that this happened this way.
Yes, it is definitely the World Series' fault.
They are at wrong, in the wrong.
I think they will change it next year.